once you've made a decision to support something, you're hardwired in your brain to make that same decision again the next time the position is presented to you. Because if you change your mind once you've supported something, then you have to admit that you were at one time wrong.
Welcome to Matters of Soul Importance, where we dive deeply into topics of both earthly and eternal consequence. I'm Roxanne Solonen, faith columnist and features writer for the Forum, author, and speaker. Earlier this year, I was listening to either a podcast or radio segment. I honestly can't remember which it was, but I heard a guest, Angela Copenhaver, speaking to the reality of what it is we're talking about when we discuss the contents of the womb of a pregnant mother. The answer should be obvious, but as I've learned in my decades plus of sidewalk advocacy and my area's only abortion facility, that is not always the case. Some argue that the thing inside the woman is not human, not a person, not even living. It seems strange to those of us who know the answer, but it's worth discussing because if it is a unique, unrepeatable, distinct human being with its own DNA, our response to its existence should be humane. Sadly, this is not the case when it comes to abortion. But obviously, it's also a loaded question in many ways. Angela Copenhaver once considered herself pro-choice. We'll hear today about her journey from believing what grows inside a pregnant woman's womb is none of our business to understanding that it's everyone's business. She'll approach this from a view of science, most of all. We'll also hear about Angela's ministry, Human from Day One, and why this conversation matters. Now, let's meet Angela. Well, welcome to Matters of Soul Importance, Angela. I'm happy to have you as my guest this morning. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. So happy to be here with you.
Awesome. Well, as I said in the intro, I don't remember exactly how I found out about you, but I'm glad to have found out about you. I think the conversation that we're going to have this morning can be very helpful to people who are confused or just pro-life people who need to articulate this. I know I'm someone as a sidewalk advocate at an abortion facility who has struggled to find the right words when contentions come my way and challenges. And I do my best, but I'm hoping that you can help me here today. So you are now a pro-life advocate as well. And but I want to hear a little bit about your journey into faith, starting with your childhood and what kind of home you grew up in, what was the faith like, and then, just kind of hear about your background so we can kind of understand where you're coming from. So why don't you tell us where you grew up and what was your faith like in those early years?
Yeah, I was raised in Lincoln, Nebraska. That's where I currently live right now as well. In my faith life, I've always been Christian. My mother was, we went to a non-denominational church. My father was not such a strong believer. So there was always some confusion there, with mom really believes in God and I'm not sure that dad does. So that was a little bit confusing growing up. But, as I became an adult, I really believed in Christ, but, my husband and I, we never went to church. We didn't have any faith or prayer life or anything like that for a good part of our marriage, probably at least 10 years into our marriage, before the conversion process started to really take place.
Interesting. Okay. So what were some of the moments, the key moments of that conversion process? What sort of woke you up to realizing that maybe you needed to step into that faith a little bit more than you had?
Yeah. Well, God's very patient, and thankfully.
Yes.
We were living in Virginia and our family was living in Nebraska. I had been transferred there for work. I was doing sales and marketing for a major transportation company. And I used to take a walk on the beach every morning. And during that walk on the beach, I would look at what I call the mini mansions that are along the beach, while the sun's rising. And I was always focused on those enormous homes. And, I made a good wage. I did. But I couldn't afford a $5 million house. And that's what I really wanted. So I spent most of my time just kind of gazing at those homes, thinking, who do I need to hire? Who do I need to fire? What accounts do I need to win in order to get more and more money? Because, I just thought that's what makes a person happy. And then one morning, I was feeling a little homesick. My daughter was getting ready to give birth to my first grandchild. I was thousands of miles away, and I was, really missing them. And I paused at that moment and turned and looked at the black Atlantic Ocean. And this beautiful orange ball was just coming up over the horizon. And it was unbelievably beautiful. And while I was looking at that, I heard a voice in my head say, "Why do you focus on man-made things and you never once turn your head to look at what God has made?" And I stood there just very profoundly watching that sunrise. And honestly, the sun doesn't take that long to come up. It comes up pretty quickly in a matter of 4 to 5 minutes. It's all the way up. And so the next thought that I had was, you should be living with your family and visiting the ocean instead of living with the ocean and visiting your family. And, at the moment, I really felt like I was just homesick and needed to go home. And so I went home for my walk that morning and told my husband, I think I'm going to quit my job and we're going to move home and I'm going to be a full-time grandma. My daughter was just finishing medical school and I didn't want our granddaughter to be with a nanny all the time. And I didn't want to be a holiday grandma.
Right.
So, he, of course, was a little astonished. So, what happened on your walk this morning? But 3 months later, we did. I did leave my position. We moved back to Nebraska. And that really was the beginning of my faith journey, although I didn't know it at the time. When we moved back to Nebraska, my daughter had become Catholic when she got married. And she was actively, going to mass in church. And I said to my husband, while we're here, I really feel like we should start going to church with our children. Just with that confusion of me growing up, I really wanted to understand more what my daughter was teaching our grandchildren. And so that we didn't do anything that was, counteracting what she was trying to teach the kiddos.
Sure.
So we started going to mass and we went for a good solid 3 years every Sunday with them. And once again, I said, God is patient and he knows when the right time is. So we were sitting in mass and it was time for communion. And my little granddaughter was now 3 years old. And she was sitting on my lap and I asked her, "Do you want to go up to communion with mommy or would you like to sit with Grammy?" And she said to me, "I'd like to go to communion with you, Grammy." And then, of course, I'm looking at her, I'm trying to explain, well, Grandma's not Catholic, I don't go up to communion, and it's really quite a quick process as well. So I was trying to hurry and get her to make a decision whether she was going to go with her mother or sit with me. And she put her hands on my cheeks and put her nose right to my nose and looked square in my eyes. And remember, she's 3 years old. She said, "But you need communion too, Grammy."
Oh.
And I immediately burst into tears. I did. I just burst into tears at that moment. And when her mom came back, I'm now crying like, I'm not a beautiful crier. My nose runs and my eyes get red, the whole thing. And I'm trying to cry quietly. But my daughter is like, Mom, what happened?
What did my daughter do to you?
Yes, what happened in this small amount of time? And, I said to her, I feel like God just put his hands on my face and told me to go to communion in the only one voice on this earth that I never say no to, my grandchild. So I think if it would have been an adult or somebody else, even my daughter, saying, Mom, I think you need to, increase your faith life and do these kinds of things, I would have given her 100 reasons why I was not worthy, why, things I had done in my life would never, just don't go together with it. But it was a grandchild who said it. And, for the voice of a child.
Yeah. How old were you?
At that time, gosh, I was in my middle 40s at that point.
You know what is so striking to me is that we're in a time right now where our children are leaving the faith in droves, and we're a lot of people. I'm not a grandmother yet, but I have friends who are, and that's their biggest concern is that their grandchildren won't be satiated in the good news and the truth and live that life, that we know that is blessed.
Right.
And so it's the opposite right now. There's a deep heartache to get our children and grandchildren back onto this path of goodness. And in your case, it was the opposite. It was your little 3-year-old granddaughter. That's so beautiful. I can recall moments when my young children were God's voice to me too, just in little moments where I was down or whatever. And it really seemed like God to me. It really felt like God was working through them to talk to me. So that's so beautiful. So, okay. So then you sign up for RCIA or?
Yeah, we did. Yeah. So my husband and I had a long conversation that day after we finished with church, and he signed us up for RCIA, and we joined the church that following April at Easter Vigil.
One of the things, Angela, sorry to interrupt. I was thinking too, it might be helpful for our listeners to understand why non-Catholics would be denied the Eucharist, because that's something I think that's misunderstood. How as a former non-Catholic, how would you describe that? Because I think it's been portrayed as that we're not being very nice and calling everyone up to receive.
Right. And, after I went through RCIA, I really got a very good understanding of that. It's not that, as a Catholic, you want to deny everybody the Eucharist, which is the true body and blood of Christ. It's that we want everyone who receives the Eucharist to really understand and have the instruction of what it is that they're receiving. It's not just a piece of bread. It's not pretend, it's real. And, we want everyone, of course, to receive the Eucharist, but we also want you to have a good understanding of what that is and what the Catholic faith truly teaches about the Eucharist prior to having your first communion.
Right. Thank you. I just think that's helpful. I know my husband's a convert, and one of the beginning points was when he couldn't come to communion with me. He couldn't come up for the Eucharist. And we were newly married, and I was so sad. I didn't realize how much it would hurt for us to be divided in that way. But it was the beginning point of him coming forward, coming closer. So, even though we're talking about this, I'm glad we touched on it. Obviously, we're going to talk more in terms of pro-life and pro-choice and all that. So tell us where were you at then around that time? Like you describe yourself as formerly pro-choice. So share a little bit about that and how that changed also.
Sure. So, the most of my life, I was very much pro-choice. I did not work for Planned Parenthood. I did volunteer for them over a period of years when I lived in Montana. And I definitely gave them a good portion of money and helped them to raise money. So when I became Catholic, obviously pro-choice and that kind of activity, they really don't go together. They're the opposite. So, I just thought, well, okay, I don't really believe that any longer. But I wasn't really pro-life right away, even though my conversion was so profound. It just really moved me to the middle. I just became one of those people that said, I don't believe in abortion personally, but who am I to tell other people what they can and cannot believe?
What
So
what about before that? Before even going in the middle, like where were you at when you were volunteering for Planned Parenthood in your mind and heart? Like what was your position?
sure. I really thought that I was helping women. I did. I felt that, it was empowering women to be able to make these choices. I drank the Kool-Aid, basically. I believed everything that they said until I had my conversion. And then I started to question some things. And I didn't question it publicly. It was a very personal journey. But as those questions began to arise, then the Lord started to present things to me also that pushed me to have to really face those decisions that I had made previously. So,
I can almost hear maybe some people who would be still on that side of things saying, well, yeah, and then you joined this church and then, they propagandized you to become, they like forced you to
yeah,
become pro-life. So speak to that a little
yeah.
bit, how it wasn't really that. I don't know, but
Yeah, it was not that at all, actually. I just kept that pro choice life to myself. Really, none of my friends knew it, and we didn't really talk about it. And, it was time for me to go back to work now. So I started praying, Lord, please let me have a job where I can talk about Christ and not get fired. So I had taken care of my daughter's children at that point for about 7 years while she finished her residency. And, I was ready to go back to work. So I started listening to Catholic radio in Nebraska, and they were advertising for a development director. So, I thought, well, I don't have any radio experience, but I certainly have a lot of sales and marketing experience. I'm just going to send them a letter. So I sent them a letter that said, basically, I don't have any radio experience, but here's how your network changed my life, and got the job. So I just thought, God wants me to work on evangelization for the rest of my life. And I was very happy in that position. So I was doing that for about 4 years when a volunteer for the radio network came in and asked me to read the 40 Days for Life book. And she was very excited about it. She came in my office, Angela, please, we want everybody to read this 40 Days for Life book. We're getting ready for the campaign here in Nebraska. And when you're done reading it, we'd like you to sign the back and pass it along to someone else. And I said to her, thank you so much for bringing me this book. I love to read. But in my brain, I was saying, there is no way I want to read this book. I know what it's about, and I'm ignoring that part of my past. However, I was going to have to read it because I couldn't lie to her and tell her I did. And she certainly was going to ask if I did. So when I got to chapter 33, the chapter is titled Take It Personal, and it should have been titled Take It Personal, Angela, because it is about a grandmother who was the 40 Days for Life champion in Montana, and her granddaughter was scheduled for an abortion at the facility in Helena, Montana. So when I read, which is it's like 3 pages, it's not a long chapter. But when I read it, I once again had a little bit of a meltdown because I have been to that facility. I know what it looks like. It was Planned Parenthood of Montana that I was helping to raise money for. And so, I thought to myself, oh my goodness, what have I done? What have I paid for with my money? Who have I led away from Christ with my poor example? And the decisions that I have made in the past, and what do I do now? So, yeah, that was my true conversion point, was at that point. And I really just started praying about, Lord, what do you want me to do with this?
I'm gonna take you back because the question is coming to my mind. I think I sort of asked it, but I want to get more into it because I'm trying to get into the mindset of those who end up pro-choice. What were there things in your past that led you into that? I'm going to just say lie.
Yeah.
Were there things growing up in your teen years, in your college years, whatever? Because I want to understand how that happens. And obviously there's like these two worldviews, and right now they're kind of colliding, right? So how did that first worldview like become who you were about, that you would volunteer and give money to Planned Parenthood?
Well, when with the company that I run now, which is called We Teach Think and humanfromday1.com, we really dive into the psychology of marketing and how people develop opinions, decision-making skills, and biases without even knowing that you've been influenced. So over a period of, 50 years, the pro-abortion marketing has done such a fantastic job of selling their product as helping women, as empowering women, in making women stronger. It's healthcare. They use words that are really positive words. And if you don't dive into the details, you begin to believe these kinds of things. So you start to make decisions based off of just repeated exposure to an idea or an ideology, where your brain starts to tell you this is truth, even when it is sometimes not truth. So, there wasn't a specific moment in my life that I all of a sudden said I'm pro-choice. And I think with a lot of the people who are middle-minded, the folks that say, I don't believe in abortion personally, but have also been exposed to just a repeated message over and over and over again until your brain remembers it as truth, even if it is not. A question I ask often is, what day of your life did you learn the difference between Pepsi and Coke?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, what day of your life? Any of your listeners, I encourage them to, what day of your life did you learn the difference between those two products? You didn't have a class in school. Your parents likely did not sit you down and have a Coke and Pepsi talk. Likely there was either Coke or Pepsi in your home, and you had what's called the familiarity effect take place. So you don't really remember, but you've seen both products advertised millions and millions and millions of times. So I use the Coke and Pepsi analogy because people are so strongly either Coke or Pepsi.
Well, here's the interesting thing about that. I grew up in a Pepsi household. My husband drinks Diet Pepsi, but I switched over to Coke at some point, and I don't remember exactly, but I am a Coke girl. And it is kind of funny because when you were talking about, I remember in college saying the same thing. I was clear. I was Catholic, and I did have some background, but we didn't talk about abortion a lot. But in college, I picked that up, that I would never do that. I realized no. But I would never like put that on someone else. That was just not compassionate. I couldn't do that until I realized that I would never say that about like killing my neighbor who didn't do anything, or, I would never like say, well, I would never kill that person, but someone else can. I mean, like the logic finally got to me because I am a very logical person. So, but anyway, I did have that position too. And I just want to make that clear that I switched over not only from Pepsi to Coke, but pro-choice to pro-life. So interesting.
Yeah. And it happens in many different ways. But, once you've made a decision to support something, you're hardwired in your brain to make that same decision again the next time the position is presented to you. Because if you change your mind once you've supported something, then you have to admit that you were at one time wrong. And it's also something that we don't like to do as humans. We don't like to say, oh, I was wrong about that. It's difficult.
It feels
So,
comfortable. It feels easy. It's the path of least resistance to just go with something and stick with it. It's just easier.
yeah, it's called a heuristic. A heuristic is a rule of thumb. So once you've made a decision to support or go along with something, you're more likely to make that decision again. And then it becomes what's remembered as a rule of thumb to your brain. So you've got two systems in your brain. System one is the one that answers quickly with the answer right away without you thinking about it. System two learns and looks at things statistically. Now, you don't always have time to make a decision, based off of, let's say you're coming up to a yellow light. I wonder what the statistical analysis is that I'll be in an accident if I go through this yellow light. You don't have time to do that. But you likely have a heuristic in your brain that is, well, the last time I went through the yellow light, I did not get in an accident. Therefore, I will not get in an accident again this time if I go through the yellow light. So you develop that rule of thumb that's in your brain. So your system one will tell you the answer before you've actually taken the time to look into the details.
Fascinating. And what I see happening here is this isn't just about marketing, but it's about psychology, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we want to do is try to teach people the psychology of marketing so that they can understand how they develop biases, how other people develop biases, how they make decisions, support those decisions, and how, when we try to tell somebody as a pro-life person, don't you understand that it's murder if you take that baby out of an area that's conducive to its needs? Well, that gives emotions really high quickly. And, when you start accusing somebody of murder, their brain is like on alert right away, so we've got to find more effective ways to use words that aren't already learned, aren't already instilled as a bias, to help people actually engage their system two, where they can look at the facts that, and I usually don't use the word truth either, because the word truth is already a bias in people's brains. So we need to look at the facts, we need to look at the details and make a educated decision on our own, bypassing those influences that have already infiltrated our brain for years and years.
Wow. So how did you get into the ministries that you're doing now? I guess we kind of skipped over a little bit of that. How did that evolve?
Yeah, well, I took some time and really prayed about it, because it was about 3 months. Lord, what do you want me to do with this information? Because now I realize I have to do something, and I realized I'm being called to do something. And, now that I've had this faith journey, I need to respond to the call. So, one day while I was driving to work, I thought, you know what? You know what to do. You know how to build a strategy to combat a formidable competitor, a worldwide competitor. You've done that. I worked for 22 years in that industry. So just follow the method. So I did. I took the time. I wrote the business plan for We Teach Think. I started doing the research to find out, where would our niche be? And I knew a lot about what the pro-choice side was doing. I didn't know a lot about what the pro-life side was doing. But as I started doing the research, I found that about 19% of the US population is staunchly pro-choice. So they're the people that want abortion anytime during a pregnancy, on demand for any reason. And then I found about 22% of the US population is pro-life, abortion, not at any time. But I found that about 59% of the US population is satisfied with the status quo right now. Like, it's settled law. I don't want to, this doesn't apply to me. So those are the folks that are the not me, but people. And so, most of the pro-life money is being spent right now on what we call abortion determined individuals, women that are actively seeking an abortion. And we need to continue to focus on those people, the sidewalk advocates, the pregnancy centers, all of those places need to be well funded because we do want to stop the immediate danger. But there's basically $0 being spent trying to move those middle-minded people to a life-minded position. And that's what we need to do if we want to make this topic unthinkable. So I modeled our advertising after other nationwide marketing campaigns that took something from being socially acceptable to socially unacceptable. Starting with, I did research on the Keep America Beautiful campaign, the seatbelt dummies, forest fires, and Smokey the Bear. All of these things at one point in time were socially acceptable things to do and are now unthinkable. So, I ask people all the time, can you imagine a senator proposing legislation that would allow people to drive while intoxicated?
Mm-hmm.
It won't happen.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen because it's a socially unacceptable thing to do, even though there are still people who drive while intoxicated. But it's the majority of people understand that doing that behavior is dangerous to themselves and society. So what we need to do is to make abortion, the thought of having it, as unthinkable in the majority of Americans' minds. Then it won't matter what the laws say. People will just stop doing it.
So I have a couple of thoughts. One is I agree that Planned Parenthood has been just amazingly adept at marketing, and I've been saying that for a long time. I mean, they just have it down. But one of the things is they're this big corporation that's getting lots of money, and they're a big business, and they have the resources and the drive to get that marketing campaign out there, where it seems like the other side, we're just kind of out there piecemealing it together. We don't have like a big source like they do that's cohesive. So I'm wondering how you bridge that. Is that something that you've confronted? Like, we don't have a comparable industry that's making money, that has a lot of money. So how do you do that then? How do you try to shape that without that larger organization?
Right. And that's definitely a concern. They have lots of money. They are very well funded. But the tide is turning. Mm-hmm. And people are starting to understand that it's just too extreme. The positions that they're putting forward right now, I really don't think are mainstream positions. Trying to raise money to combat a major competitor is definitely a David and Goliath situation here. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, when we Teach Think is a 501c3 organization. So when we are trying to raise money to run our advertising in the community, and our goal is to have our advertising running nationwide as soon as we can to move that 59% to a life-minded position. When we have two separate ways that we do it. You can raise money for your specific community. Let's say Lincoln, Nebraska. If you donate to the Lincoln, Nebraska Fund on our website, 100% of those dollars we spend in Lincoln, Nebraska, running that advertising. Lincoln doesn't pay for Omaha or Chicago or New York City. We also have what we call the general fund, and the general fund is what helps us to, produce our products, our television commercials, our videos, our billboards, and so forth. So we try to do it as a grassroots effort, but we don't have those, billion-dollar backers that Planned Parenthood does. And any of the abortion industry. So, we need to really start to focus on trying to change the culture and, just making an appeal to communities that this is something that we need to do and, take responsibility for your own town, one town at a time.
Right. There's a couple thoughts there too. I know that the abortion question has been thrown back to the states. However, Planned Parenthood, that bigger organization, is getting involved and throwing lots of money into those individual states. So it doesn't feel like we're even able to make those decisions. But I think we'll take a small break here, a little pause, and then I do want to ask the question that I kind of had as our leading question: is it a parasite, alien, or human? Because that was just my way of pulling us into this conversation of what is in the womb. Does it matter? And so if we could kind of address that and then move forward again into this interesting concept of how we're communicating this, because it's so important. And I'm hoping, Angela, that with the recent election and how it kind of maybe is kind of poking a little hole in that narrative that we haven't been able to penetrate, I'm hoping maybe there's some relief here where we can start having a conversation based on common sense. I don't know, but that's my hope. So we'll take a little break and we'll be right back with more Matters of Soul Importance with Angela Copenhaver.
Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month. You'll get unlimited access to the news you need to stay engaged and connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe now to get 3 months of local news for only 99 cents a month.
Welcome back to Matters of Soul Importance. This is Roxanne Solonen, your host. I wanted to answer that question that I kind of set things up with is, what is in the womb of a pregnant woman? Is it a parasite, an alien, or a human? Because I think that's one of the things we need to think about, right? And what is it? And I know there's a huge disconnect. I think most people recognize that when they're pregnant, we say, I'm going to have a baby. You don't say, I'm going to have a parasite. I'm going to have an alien. I'm going to have a carrot, a dolphin, whatever.
Right.
But so there's a disconnect there. So let's just start asking, what is it? What is in the womb of a pregnant woman, Angela?
Yeah, very good. And on our website, we have a couple of videos that address this specifically. And when you're trying to open a new line of conversation with somebody, we like to try to use words that they haven't already learned a bias to. So usually I'll start this conversation by saying, could we agree that if a human egg and a human sperm were joined together, that it would begin growing? The answer is yes. In most cases, it does. And if something is growing, could we also agree it must be taking in some kind of nutrition? Yes. If something's growing, it has to be taking in some kind of nutrition. So if something is taking in nutrition and growing, could we ultimately agree that it must be alive? Yes. So if that something happens to be a human egg and a human sperm that were joined together, is taking in nutrition and is growing, could we ultimately agree the only thing that could be is a human person that is alive?
Mm-hmm. Hard to argue. Yeah.
Yes, it's hard to argue. So if you just follow that train of thought, and if you can't remember all of that, it's not a big deal. You can download the videos off of the We Teach Think app. They're on there. You can share them easily with others. And then we have another video that's called What If? And so when you are talking about something that's alive in the womb and growing. But then we also want to gain agreement that if you remove something from an area that is conducive to its needs, that you've aided in the death of that something. So, for example, what if I pulled a dandelion out of my yard and placed it on my driveway? Could you agree that I aided in the death of that dandelion? Yes. Okay, what if I sprayed the dandelion with some kind of insecticide? Could you also agree that I aided in the death of that dandelion? Yes. All right, what if I hired a professional lawn service to come and remove the dandelion for me? Would you also agree that I aided in the death of that dandelion? Yes. So ultimately, we have agreed that if you remove something from an area that is conducive to its needs, that you've aided in the death of that something. So you see how when we're talking about a dandelion, it's not, we didn't use the word murder. We didn't accuse somebody of something that is going to get their emotions really high. I like to use the example of a dandelion because no one cares about dandelions.
Right.
I love when we're giving this presentation and it's dandelion season, because anytime you see a dandelion from this point forward, you're going to think about what we just said. So, those are all of the ways that abortion occur. We're talking about a dandelion, but they understand it and their brain will make that transition. So what we ultimately want people to do is to have a little bit of incongruence in their cognitive thought process so that later when they're thinking about it on their own, that light bulb goes on in their own brain and they're able to make that transition from, yes, it is aiding in the death of something, or no, it is not aiding in the death of something. But we want them to have that internal conflict with themselves. That's when true change happens in a person's, brain, their soul, their heart, what they believe, and what they're going to support. So, just trying to find new ways to present information that they will think about without emotions getting out of control.
Right. And I assume you're targeting, if that could be the word to be used, those who are, before they get into that situation, the family members that come aside the person that's in that situation. I mean, so much of the work here has to be done before the trauma or before the moment that is where you're in crisis, right? I mean,
Right.
that's the task, right? That's the big task is to. So you were saying earlier that you think the tide is turning. I'm curious about your ideas about that, since you're really involved in the center of this. What are you seeing that brings you hope?
Well, young people bring me hope. Number one, I believe that, science is on our side. If we teach the science, we help to, negate the narrative of the pro-abortion side and present things in, a matter of psychology, decision making, so forth like that. We present the information in a different format. I really think that the next generations are going to grow up and say, what were you thinking? I tested out the theory of change over generations. When I was first doing the research for this, I gathered up 6 of my grandkids. They were all at the kitchen table. And I said to them, you know, when Grammy was a little girl, that like when we were done with our trash bag, we just put the window of the car down and just fling it out the car window. That's what we did. And there was a collective gasp around the table, and their response was, Grammy, you didn't recycle? Okay. So we went from a generation that littered to a generation that cleaned up after others who littered to a generation that would confront people that were littering to a generation now that doesn't even allow you to throw things in the trash. You must recycle. So it changes over time, but we have to do that incrementally. And so, I do believe that there is hope in our young people, but we've got to get the information to them. They've got to see it more times than they see the pro-abortion information. And we've got to be consistent with our messages.
It's a long game, right? That you're playing.
It is a long game that we're playing. And, the marketing that we've designed is not targeted towards what we call abortion determined individuals, people that are actively seeking an abortion. We are actively marketing to the 59%, the not me, but people. And that's who we want to get our information in front of. We are not a political organization. We don't support candidates or legislation. But what we want to do is to make abortion unthinkable in the next generation so that the next generations will take the torch and fight for life no matter what.
What are some of the ways you're doing that? I know you mentioned in our earlier conversation that there's an app that you're recommending. Can you tell us about the app?
Sure. Yeah, we would love everyone to download the We Teach Think app. Just go to the App Store, either Apple or Android. It's on both. Type in We Teach Think. Our logo will pop up. You can download the app. On the app, there is a media tab. On that media tab, you can download all of our videos. So we've got 4 commercial kits, 4 billboards that go along with them. As well as we just started an animation series, which is targeted towards, those that are 19 or younger, that really talks to the not me, but.
I don't leave my campfire unattended, but who am I to say that someone else can? I don't let my toddler ride in the front seat, but who am I to tell other parents they shouldn't?
What?
I don't drive drunk, but who am I to tell others they're wrong if they do?
Seriously?
I don't believe in abortion, but who am I to force my opinion on someone else?
Really? Some things people say just don't make sense.
So what we're trying to point out there is how ridiculous that sounds.
Absolutely.
And because you would immediately, people will think to themselves, what are you thinking?
Right.
So like when somebody says to me now, I don't believe in abortion personally, but who am I to tell others? I go, I know I don't drive drunk, but who am I to tell other people that they shouldn't?
It's brilliant. And
just be quiet, just be quiet after you say that, because then they'll start to tell you all the reasons why you shouldn't drive drunk.
It's interesting because I've heard some really great people, having conversations and making headway in terms of logic, but yours is a little bit different approach than I've heard before. Are there days that you look back and can't believe that you're in this place right now?
Oh my goodness. If you would have told me 10 or 15 years ago that, you're going to quit your job, move home, be a full-time grandma, then you're going to go work, become Catholic, go work for a radio network, try to bring people to Christ, then you're going to leave that job, spend your retirement savings on starting a nationwide pro-life marketing organization, I would have just fell to the floor in laughter because totally not your girl, no, I'm the wrong person. But that is exactly what happened. And, I truly feel that this is my life's calling. And when you look back, when I look back at my life, I realize now that I feel like everything that I was doing before was preparing me for doing this. And you can't see it when you're in it. But when you look back, you can see it. And I can see God's hand, protecting me, taking care of me, allowing me to fail at other things, so that I would not be content and that I would keep moving forward. So,
Absolutely. And it's also important that you had a different position earlier. And I mean, all of that, even, thinking about the ocean when you were walking alongside it and the thoughts that you were having, like the way your own mind was working and not even understanding how you were justifying things, like you were able to then learn that. I don't know how, but I'm curious about how that all unfolded. But little by little, that was revealed to you. Like there's a way to think about things and make them make sense, as we would say.
Right.
So yeah. So how is this playing out in your life? Like, what is your day-to-day life like right now as you're trying to expand this?
Right. Well, right now, our goal is to have our advertising running in all 50 states. So I don't have anything running in North Dakota. I'm very happy to be talking to people up there. We have a pretty good presence in South Dakota, Nebraska, and a few other states around Minnesota and Wisconsin. But I'd love to be in North Dakota. So I would ask your listeners, if you have an event where you need a pro-life speaker to come and talk about the next frontier and how we're going to fix this problem, I would love to come and talk to your group of people. I'd love to talk to somebody if you're feeling the Lord nudging you a little bit to say, this is something I'd like to get involved in. Please send me an email. I'd like to talk about how we could get things going in your community. And you don't have to be Warren Buffett to get this going. You don't have to have millions and billions of dollars. If God wanted that to be the case, he would have made me independently wealthy and I would just be paying for it to run everywhere in the United States. But what he wants is for us to talk to each other. He wants us to be together, to teach each other, to be the messenger. So what I do on a day-to-day basis is I travel around the United States talking about marketing, psychology, and how we can change this in your community.
And so for people to get involved, what sort of things would they get involved in?
Well, first of all, we would want to have, get the information in your town, your state, whatnot. So there's lots of different ways we can do that. Sometimes I come and speak at an already organized, a 40 Days for Life kickoff or some kind of event that you're having or a parish mission or something like that. But it doesn't have to be that. We can send out the information. I encourage people to download the app. You can share all of our videos, and that is free. It costs nothing to do that. Just make people aware of what's out there. We also have We Teach Think magazine, which is, we have 2 that are published at this point. If you'd like to have hard copies of them, you can send me an email at angela@weteachthink.com and let me know, and I'll send those out to you. If you're tech savvy, you can look at the PDF copy of both magazines, either on the humanfromdayone.com website, or they're also on the app. So you can read them electronically as well.
Angela, I'm going to ask you to share any success stories or stories of people that you've confronted and that you've been able to help them think better about this. Do you have any? I know it's hard to recall maybe specific stories, but what are some examples of lives that have changed already since you started this endeavor?
Yeah, it's amazing that, sometimes you feel like you're like, am I even making any progress? Because it's not like sidewalk advocates where, you got to save today. People see our advertising and I don't know that it really has an impact. But I had a moment where I was, feeling like I am just beating my head against the wall. What am I doing? And I had an individual say to me that I know that there is at least one child alive today because of what you're doing. And she went on to tell me a story about how her mother had gotten involved. This person had had several abortions prior to this. but her mom was involved in helping me with some stuff. And so she had seen the videos and so forth, became pregnant again. And because of the work that we were doing, decided, against abortion, which was fantastic. I needed that day. She showed me a picture of the baby.
Oh,
And then there was immediately, as soon as I first started this, I got in touch with some people in Montana, in Helena, and I went up there to speak to the 40 Days for Life kickoff in Helena, Montana. So there was a couple, 300 people there at the event. And I really have been working hard in that state because, I'm trying to undo whatever I did before.
yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm really emotionally attached to the state of Montana. But so I was there, and all those people are there, and I'm starting my presentation, and I'm going through how I read the 40 Days for Life book. And the grandmother, of course, she's there. I got to meet her. And, I got choked up when I was telling the story. And I said, I'm here today, I guess, to tell you that I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what I did. And there was a resounding 300 people saying back all at the same time, we forgive you.
Wow.
And that forgiveness it felt so good. So, my words to people that if you've had an abortion, if you've taken somebody for an abortion, if you've paid for an abortion, if you have supported it, in whatever aspect, and you're listening right now, you can be forgiven. You are forgiven for doing that. God is not so worried about what you've already done in your life. He's more concerned with what you're getting ready to do. So just ask for that forgiveness. You can do it. You can move forward. There is hope, and you don't have to be ashamed of your past.
That's so beautiful. And another thing too is just, when you were kind of talking about how some days it feels like you haven't gotten much ground, I think the lesson there too is that line, right? That we're not expected to be successful, but just faithful. And we just have to trust that God is going to use our hearts in whatever work we're doing in accord with Him, and He will amplify it. It might not even, the fruits might not be even in our lifetime, right? But we're doing something, and we're doing it for Him, and we're trying to be faithful. And that's all we can do, right? That's all we can give.
Yeah. And, I think about it all the time that God doesn't choose those who are equipped. He equips those He chooses. So, if you're feeling moved to do something in the pro-life, I encourage you act on that, because that is a message from our Lord that, we need to do something about this. And we all cannot sit on the sidelines anymore. We have to get in the game. We've got to get in the game. So,
yeah, as a sidewalk advocate, I've had so many people say, I could never do what you do. I could never, and it's like, well, I never thought I was going to be doing this either. I mean, it happened incrementally, just like it did for you. And I would have never imagined that was going to be what I was going to be doing someday. But really, it's not hard when you know why you're doing it, and you believe that you're going to bring a message of hope and life. I mean, there's no, and that God will take care of us, that He will protect us and see to it that word, that our efforts are fruitful. And so when we have Him on our side, we can't really fail, So that's the other thing is, like, none of this is on our own accord, right? It's like through His strength are we able to get anything accomplished, but He's asking us to. He's just asking us to try.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to take up, I have it printed on the wall of my office, with God, all things are possible. And I read it every day, because it's not easy to be immersed in this kind of work, every single day. It really isn't.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to have faith that God is going to be with us, and in His time. When I first started the organization, like 10 months into it, it was COVID.
Wow.
And I'm like, seriously, Lord? I mean, it's hard to public speak when there's no public. So
Right.
I'm going to trust you on this one, but we made it through. And honestly, I think we came out stronger on the other side. So, just to trust that, all things are possible in his time.
Another lesson I'm taking from it, just encouragement, is I'm 56, so I'm kind of at that point in my life where I'm moving ahead, and my kids are pretty much grown, and so trying to figure out what God wants for me. And I think it's beautiful the way He shaped your life when you began to trust in Him more. And I think that we don't give enough credence to our elderly population, in our world. They have so much wisdom, and everyone plays a part. As long as we're living and breathing, we have a role to play in this body of Christ. So I just want to thank you, Angela, for taking up the charge and, not going into retirement and flying back to that ocean view and getting that nice house that you could look at all day or look at the ocean all day, because you have a whole different kind of ocean that you're looking at, and a different kind of life that you're able to enjoy. And it came from your heart. So I just thank you for your work. It's fascinating, and I'm excited to share it with more people. And yeah, I would love to have you figure out how we can get you to North Dakota. So I'll be working on that.
Okay, very good. I'm looking forward to it. And I am so passionate about this. I would come to North Dakota even in the winter. So,
Wow, that's saying something. Well, we're coming up on that, so
I know.
maybe that will
Yes.
happen. All right, yeah, it'd be wonderful to meet you, Angela, and thank you for sharing your story with us. And one more question: how does your family, I'm just curious, the daughter that became Catholic, how and your husband, how are
Yeah.
they perceived your journey?
Well, my husband is a saint, because I have quit my job twice to change our life dramatically, and he has been with me every step. He's president of my board of directors, so he is right there with me. My daughter's is a pro-life physician, and she takes care of women, delivers babies most every day. And so she helps me a lot, when I'm trying to write things about the science of the preborn journey.
Sure.
We're getting ready to publish a book sometime next spring for the itty bitties, which is, the preborn journey, and trying to help them to visualize what's actually taking place, because we want to get to them at the very beginning. So we're really looking forward to that. But she helps me with the science behind that to make sure that I'm accurate in what I'm writing. So yeah, it's the whole family is together. Most of the commercials that you'll see on our website, almost all of the actors that are young are my grandchildren. So
I wondered about that, because I saw, when I looked on the website, I saw a few that kind of looked a little bit like each other. So I thought, I wonder if that's her family.
they are. Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's so beautiful how you brought them all into it, and really how it was them that moved your heart to go home and have that vocation of grandmotherhood for a while, and now you're springing into other things. So it's awesome. I love hearing about people's stories, and you're doing good things. So I'm looking forward to meeting you. Let's just plan on that, even though the details haven't come together yet. But I will be sharing that app with people. And is there anything else that we didn't cover that you just wanted to share today? I always leave it open at the end.
I have a quote on We Teach Think magazine too that says, all that is necessary for the triumph of evil is that good men do nothing. And Edmund Burke had said that. And I think about that all the time, in that, you don't have to be a person that, gets up and speaks in front of hundreds of people. You don't have, even if you're not called to be a sidewalk advocate, you are called to do something. And so, pray about it and ask God, what does he want you to do on this topic? And then follow through. It was a woman who brought me a book to read that changed the course of my life. And she had no idea that day. She didn't think that morning, I'm going to take this book to Angela and she's going to have a little bit of a meltdown and then she's going to change her life. She didn't know that, but God knew it. And so all she did was deliver a book to a friend So, we just have to trust that, plant the seeds and know that God will water them for you. So just plant the seeds. Yeah, that's what I ask everybody to do.
Well, thank you so much, Angela. You have a beautiful heart, and we will talk more with you soon. So thank you and God bless. Thanks for being on Matters of Soul Importance today.
Yep. God bless you. Bye.
What grows in the womb of a pregnant woman? I've yet to hear a new mom, learning of a pregnancy, say with glee, "I'm having a parasite." Some might say, bowing to the pro-abortion crowd, "I'm having a fetus." But even in that, there's a recognition of a human life growing, since fetus is a Latin word for offspring. Let's not make things more confusing than they need to be. We know that the growing thing in a human womb is a human being. But I love Angela's proposal. Rather than trying to argue the way we've been doing to make our pro-life points, we need to pause, think about our goal, and recognize our limitations. We're up against a major marketing machine that has seemed to won the minds of America, but as Angela also noted, we are making ground on the reality-based position, a position that recognizes that each human life brings more love into the world. We've got to keep working to frame the conversation in a way that our pro-abortion or pro-choice brothers and sisters can see the beauty and hope in it, one conversation at a time. After our discussion, I dug through my files to find out how I'd come across Angela, and I finally found it in an old email from Liz Kelly, who was a guest on Matters of Soul Importance back in March. Liz had been a speaker at a conference in Omaha and had met Angela there, finding her presentation brilliant and noting her story and her approach were truly compelling, and I think she's on to something a bit new and much needed. She has ads for television, billboards, and the like, ready to go for anyone who wants to use them in their communities, and I thought you would really appreciate her message and method. Liz was right. I'm grateful Angela could spend a little time with me and all of us today, bringing hope in a world of despair and a light in a world of darkness. Let me end with a few of Angela's quotes that bear repeating. God is not so worried about what you've done in your life. He's more concerned about what you're getting ready to do. God doesn't choose the equipped. He equips those he chooses. We can't sit on the sidelines anymore. We have to get in the game. And finally, with God, all things are possible. One of my favorites. Thank you again, Angela. In our next episode, we'll ask, is there a place for the divorced in church? My conversation with Carrie Bishop will be another reminder that no matter where you're at, God sees your heart and he wants to be part of your life. If you're divorced or know someone who is struggling through this reality, I hope you'll stop back in a couple weeks to hear Carrie's story. Until then, don't lose sight of the light.